Hi, I'm Andrés Montero, and today's video is about expression maps in Dorico, but this time I'll be using only brass. I wrote a small piece for brass ensemble just for this example, and I wrote it as if it would be played with live musicians, as opposed to writing something for the samples that I'll be working with. So the score will look exactly as if I would printing it for a live recording session or a concert. Once I finished writing the piece, I changed the sound assignments in the playback to use Cinematic Studio Brass, which I think it's a good library. It's well recorded, it sounds great, and it's very easy to program. I had previously made an expression map for this sample library, and let's take a listen to the score without modifying any other playback controllers, and I will address some issues that I found. Okay, so I encountered some issues that I needed to address. First, the tuba and bass trombone sound an octave lower from what's written. This is happening because those patches are programmed to sound an octave lower from where the MIDI notes are played. So one way to solve this is by going to the setup mode in Dorico. In the layout section, go to the layout that you're working on. In this case, I have created a custom layout called Brass. Right-click on the layout and select Clef and Transposition Overrides. Find the tuba at the bottom of the window where it says Written Middle C Sounds As. Turn it on and type C5. Do the same for both columns, transposed and concert pitch. Repeat the same steps for the bass trombone and hit OK. You will see how the notes in the tuba have actually been transposed an octave lower. Now, select the whole tuba stuff and bump it up an octave. You can do this by selecting the first bar and then going to Edit and select to end a flow. Once the stuff is selected, hit Option Command arrow up on a Mac. Let's hit play and hear that now our tuba is playing in the right range. One thing to keep in mind if you're overriding the transposition in the layout, you will have to make sure you override it in every single layout where that part is present, meaning the full score or the individual part, or in this case, other custom scores that you have made. This is a different approach to the one I did with CineWinds from CineSamples. If you're interested in watching that video, I put the link in the description. Another problem I had to solve when programming the expression map was to be able to use a specific short note in Cinematic Studio Brass. This library, in addition to the key switch F0 for staccatos, has 4 additional levels of short notes, including repetitions, staccatissimo, staccato, and sforzando. These can be selected via CC1, via the mod wheel. I was not successful in creating a map in Dorico to trigger both the key switch and a CC1 value at the same time to specify a certain short note. So here's how we're gonna make this work. If you have read the Cinematic Studio Brass manual, you know that the key switch F0 is also velocity sensitive. That means that if you hit F0 at a velocity between 0 and 32, you get repetitions. From 33 to 64, you get staccatissimo. 65 to 96, staccato, and 97 to 127, you get sforzando. Once you know these values, you can program a key switch trigger and specify the velocity. The final step is to go to the patch in the contact window, right-click on the wheel, and remove the MIDI automation. Now, Dorico will trigger the specific short note correctly. When programming an expression map, remember that you will have to create multiple combinations using more than one articulation to get the best results. For example, you have to program a trigger that combines stopped and staccato plus a note length condition. If you put a staccato on top of a stopped symbol on a horn part, and if you don't have that expression map programmed, Dorico will play the natural articulation because it doesn't recognize stopped plus staccato. So be thinking about those situations when programming your expression maps. The other issue that I need to fix is the way trills are being played. As it is right now, Dorico is generating notes under the hood to play the trills, but I want to use the trills used in the sample library. In Cinematic Studio Brass, the trills are triggered by a key switch, and then you have to play the two notes that you want to hear in the trill simultaneously. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a workaround to program trills with this library without modifying the score. Even after fixing those issues, I still feel that the dynamics are not performing perfectly. The swells via CC1 and changes in velocity are there, but the sample library is not responding as I would like it to. Even though this library responds very well to velocity and CC1 changes, I still had to go into the play mode and shape some of the dynamics to get a better performance. While I was doing that, I ran into a problem with my horn 1 while I was changing CC1 in the solo phrase in bars 21 to 29. In this example, I already had drawn two lines that are highlighted in light green. That means that the dynamics have been changed from the original data that Dorico writes based on the dynamics in the score. But you can see that I have a bunch of little bumps that I would like to smooth out. When I drew a straight line to override the bumps, you can see that my previous modifications before and after my straight line went away. So I went to draw the diminuendo at the end of the phrase again, and now my straight line that I just drew went away. I tried a couple of times, but the same thing kept happening. I ended up trying the pencil, which helped, and I figured out that you need to create a new point before or after the previously modified data so that it doesn't erase what you already did. At this point, I thought things were ready to go, but when I played back this passage, it still didn't sound right. When I played only horn 1, it sounded fine. But if all parts are played, the bumps come back. I tried deleting all CC1 data that I drew, and left the original CC1 created by Dorico. Again, it plays fine if I solo the instrument, but with everyone the problem is back. If any one of you might know what the issue is, please let me know in the comments below. It's really helpful to support each other as a community, and it will be great for me as well to know if this is something that can be fixed, or if it was my problem, if I made a mistake, or if it's just a bug from Dorico. Now, let's listen to the piece after those issues have been fixed. My approach to writing this piece was to use one single staff per instrument, and I used the feature of condensing in Dorico for the score. In Contact, I used only the solo instrument patches and assigned it to each single staff. I thought this was the easiest way to deal with my piece if I wanted to have a solo passage and then a 2D unison passage without sacrificing notation too much. If you're familiar with working with samples, you know that for a 2D unison melody, it's best to use the section patch. However, to make that happen in my score, I would have had to have another single staff for the section patch. Basically, the way you would set it up in your sequencer. But I think my point here is that if you're doing that, you're treating Dorico more like a sequencer rather than a notation software. Whatever approach you use is fine. It just depends on the purpose of your music or your workflow. Is this a piece for the concert hall? Is this for a live recording session? Or is this a piece for a film where you have to get a really good sounding mock-up because you don't have budget for live musicians? Here are my thoughts so far. When I discovered Dorico and expression maps, I thought that it would be really cool if I was able to write a piece of music, have it ready for the musicians with score and parts, and at the same time have a great sounding mock-up of my piece without really spending too much time, dealing with all the dynamics and CC1 and CC7, 11, whatever you use, or velocity, right? In my opinion, if the final product has to be a great mock-up, I'd rather write a sketch in notation than I would export it as a MIDI and then I would put it into the sequencer where you will have way more tools and you have more flexibility to make a mock-up sound really, really good. But if I'm writing or orchestrating or arranging something that it's gonna be played with live musicians at a concert or a recording session, then I have to prioritize the notation. And I don't want to spend time trying to make a good mock-up. For example, I find Note Performer a great alternative for that, where I can get a pretty good idea of how the piece is sounding while I can still focus on the notation. You can definitely fine-tune your expression maps to tailor them to your sample libraries. It takes some time, but you can get a pretty good template where when it's the time to write music, you can actually sit down and focus on the music, and you don't have to think about all this technical side of the process. Those are my thoughts on Dorico and expression maps using Cinematic Studio Brass. So thank you so much for watching, and if you like this video, share it and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Until next time.